Hello and welcome to ACF Podcast, episode 7 with Brett Jones. Hey, how are you, Brett?
Doing all right, Mert. Good to be on with you again, and looking forward to today's conversation.
Yeah, me too. So, I was really wondering, why do we keep the iron cardio sequences to up to 5 reps maximum?
Yeah. So when we look at a couple different things get involved here. So let's talk about it from an energy system standpoint. When we and energy system conversations, we typically think of those as being with conditioning work. So we talk about doing a 5-second sprint or 10-second sprint to work the alactic or creatine phosphate system. We do a 30-second to a minute effort to work maybe glycolytic repeats. And then I think we're all fairly familiar with maybe the zone 2 concept, where now we're doing something for an extended period of time and we've got the aerobic system more fully deployed. So that usually happens within 1 to 3 minutes, depending on the individual that you're working with. When you look at that from an energy system standpoint and muscular contraction, what we see is way more rapid deployment of glycolysis because we burn through our initial creatine phosphate system, and the body only has so many ATP, adenosine triphosphate molecules that are there for energy production. So that's to be replaced. But the thing we have to remember with the muscle contraction is, as we contract the muscle, we prevent blood flow. So when we prevent blood flow, we can't go aerobic, right? Now we're kind of stuck in this idea of being alactic and glycolytic and trying to reproduce energy in a situation where we have a lack of blood flow, which also means we can't get rid of waste products. So if anybody's ever done a set of bicep curls to failure and you get the burn, right? It's what you're shooting for. Except it shouldn't be, but it can be. I mean, it's one of those things like, what's your goal? And what they've kind of determined from and if we look at it quickly from, we say, a hypertrophy standpoint, the mechanical stress of what's happening in the muscle fiber, the chemical stress, and that has to do with the energy system work that's going on and the acid that's produced, and also from a neurological standpoint. So those things are happening as well. So when we extend a set and we go beyond the 10 to 15 second range for getting a set done, we've been contracting, and it can be on and off, right? It's not like we're holding a maximal contraction and not doing anything. That would be more of an isometric effort. But as we extend that set and we're under tension for a longer period of time, we've reduced blood flow to certain areas. We've had to produce energy anyway, so we've produced waste products. And now we've just been glycolytic for too long. And, like as we talked about, it's really hard to make the argument that you're going aerobic especially since even extended sets don't take that long. And we're preventing blood flow or having reduced blood flow due to the muscle contractions. So keeping those reps between 3 to 5, the way the sequence also alternates between ballistic, grind, and potentially another ballistic at the end, and we're switching upper body emphasis, lower body emphasis, we cycle through some different muscle groups and different actions. We keep the effort brief, so we limit the amount of glycolysis. We get better recovery and strength work from doing that. So a long-winded explanation to say the sets just get too long, and we're not shooting for the bird. And I think that's a misinterpretation or a popular goal that doesn't necessarily have to be there, because it can be counterproductive at a certain point. Now, I was having a conversation with my friend Mike Perry the other day, and he trains a lot of BJJ and Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. And there are people and BJJ athletes that do a more bodybuilding style approach where they're doing 12 to 15 reps. They're training more towards failure. They're going for the burn to a certain extent. And you've done enough grappling and work in that area yourself. When you get locked in on somebody's gi and you're in half guard or whatever you're doing, or you're trying not to get choked out, whatever the case may be, you're going to be clenched for an extended period of time. You're going to get the burn. Anybody that's been rock climbing for their first time, they make a couple of trips up the wall and then they walk around the rest of the day with claw hands because everything's cramped and spasmed, and they can't do much for the rest of the day. So there are times where we're going to go glycolytic. Now, does that mean you have to train in a glycolytic fashion? No. You can build your capacity to get rid of those waste products and handle that situation by having mild doses of it, not extended efforts of it. Now, if you were preparing for a BJJ tournament and I knew that you needed to be able to do, 3 5-minute rounds, potentially 3 times in a day. Okay. Our training in the 4 to 6 weeks leading up to that tournament is going to change a little. We are going to push a little into some rounds that start to replicate that. But now we're peaking instead of training that way. So the training time you need to peak is actually pretty brief. Now, problem is for most athletes, basketball, for example, baseball, 180 games in a or 100, it's like 180 games in 186 days, something like that. Which one would you like to peak for? You just have to be ready to play on an ongoing basis, and so there's a different strategy there as well. So now I'm rambling.
No, I think this is a really good point. I was going to ask you about the peaking. Like, metabolic peaking takes maybe 2 weeks in an athlete's training cycle, right? Before an event, if they're an athlete that competes like 1 or 2 times a year. Even then,
there's some variation just based on the individual, but most people will be fully peaked within a 4 to 6 weeks time frame.
4 to 6. But peaking for strength takes longer, or short, or is it, or do they go hand in hand and they have to happen at the same time?
If we look at a pure strength event like a powerlifting meet, what you're going to be doing there is your training cycle will typically be 12 to 24 weeks, where you know where you're going to end up at the powerlifting meet. You know what your current 1RMs are. You're going to lay out a training cycle that shoots, depending on the level of lifter that we're looking at. Maybe you're looking for a 3 to 5% PR at the meet. And so you'll structure your training over that 12 to 24 weeks, depending on how you want to approach it, to try to peak your strength at that end time. And that's where the programming gets a little more interesting, because now we're trying to stress the system. We're still training predominantly in the 70 to 80% range. We're visiting our 85 plus range periodically. And we're trying to have that new peak at the end of that 12 to 24 week time frame.
The reason I asked was I don't think it was that clear. Like, I read some research showing that metabolic conditioning can be lost very rapidly. I don't know the numbers by heart, but I think it was over 24 days. And these were amateur to professional level athletes. And their VO2 maxes went down to the equivalent of aging about 40 years after complete sedentary conditions. Like, they didn't move at all. They they were specifically locked to the couch for 24 days or so, and they aged 40 years metabolically, and then they regained the metabolic conditioning in about 1 or 2 weeks, I think.
Yeah. So but you'll see research on strength where people will stay within 5-10% of their peak for a month or more, and of not training.
Or at some point, I don't think you lose the strength anymore. I think if you, this is anecdotal, that's something I want to speculate on and want to get your opinion on. But if you gain strength to a point, you're never going to lose most of it unless there is some structural damage or something like that. But within normal parameters, within normal life, I don't think you lose more than 20% of your strength just by observation.
Yes-ish. Yes-ish. I think there's obviously some nuance and details that would need to be described there. I'll speak for myself. Like my best barbell back squat was 518 in competition. I forget what that is in kilos, but somebody can do the math.
50-ish.
Yeah, somewhere around there. So that I can tell you I am nowhere near sniffing that sort of weight right now. My best deadlift was 573. I wouldn't go in and try to pull over 5 right now. Now I can maintain a double body weight deadlift or more based on the type of kettlebell training that I'm doing right now. So, and would I be able to ramp back up to a good level in my squat and deadlift if I started specializing in the barbell again? Yes. Now, if we take something like military press, I think with my current state of training, I could go back in and hit a barbell military press that would be very similar to my peaks. So there's some details that would need to be flushed out there with that conversation of you never lose your strength, because it's yes, from a general concept. I think if we look at strength as a general quality and our ability to apply it maybe in our daily lives, yeah, once you've achieved a certain level of strength, you're still active, you're still doing training, even though it might be different. Are you going to be in the ballpark? Yeah. Are we going to be at those peaks? Like I said, I'm nowhere near my squat and deadlift peaks.
And you're actively
notice I don't mention bench very often.
You don't almost never do bench, right?
So my best bench when I was powerlifting was about 325, which is not that great for somebody that was lifting in the 198 category. I'm just not.
Yeah, some people are not built for that.
Well, that and I never had training partners where I could really train the bench the way that I needed to. Training partners are very important for the bench. I can squat all day by myself because I can get in the squat rack with the safety pins. Real quick rant: squat in the rack with the pins properly set. And if you're going to squat outside of the rack, make sure the safety guards are in place and properly set to the height. There was a Instagram influencer. He died not a couple months ago in a failed squat attempt. Yeah. And if they had been in the rack with the pins in place, he would be alive. Yeah. And so anyway, I can squat all day by myself because I can create a safe situation. I can deadlift all day by myself.
It's very safe.
Bench. Now, from a safety standpoint, can I get in the rack and properly set the pins so that I'm safe if I fail during the rep? Yes. But the lift off, getting the bar out of the pins and being able to safely remove the bar from the pins and get in the position to bench can be incredibly stressful to the shoulders and create a lot of problems. So bench is like one of the 3 lifts where you really need training partners. And I don't have friends, so I didn't have training partners. I mean, I've done such a blended work thing for so long that usually when people are at work, I've got a couple hours where I can go lift.
Yeah.
Previously, now it's like, well, I've got a half hour. I got to squeeze my session in. Um, so, so yeah, the strength in general will maintain the really high peak 30 days, maybe a little bit beyond. Base strength levels will maintain for much longer within that range. Because I know I kind of cycled back on my training a little bit because I was dealing with a little bit of a grumpy shoulder and just had a little weird flare up after my cancer scans in May and had some weird stuff go on. And then I think my body finally just said, dude, back it down. So I did. And now I feel like I'm back, where I was. One of the key points that you mentioned in that the VO2 max study was completely sedentary. One of the things people get afraid of if they go on a week's vacation, 2 weeks vacation, they're like, oh my God, what am I going to do with my training? It's just 2 weeks. And unless you're planning on laying in bed and only getting up to use the bathroom, you're going to be moving around and doing stuff. So you will not experience that large of a decline that the people in the study did, because they truly, for experimental purposes, sat on the couch and did nothing for 2 weeks for the purposes of the study. And so, and the important thing to realize there is if you are ever in a situation where either due to illness or injury, you are forced to be sedentary, know that you are going to experience a decline in cardiovascular fitness, in particular, metabolic fitness, as you referred to it. Definitely strength levels are going to take a hit as well. You'll maintain pretty good, but you're still going to notice the difference when you get back to it. So a vacation where you're going to go, hike and swim and, even just walk a lot, you're not going to experience the decline that the people in the study did. So something that people get worried about that they don't really need to worry about.
Yeah, unless they're doing something extreme.
Yeah, or you're sick for 2 weeks. Like if you're sick and you're laying in bed for 2 weeks, yeah, you're going to be starting over. You're going to have lost a good bit of, quote, fitness and have to ramp back up. But to the point of the study, happened really quickly. Yeah. Regaining is always easier than building.
Yeah. So I want to shit on CrossFit a little bit, and then maybe
we can't do that.
No, and then maybe talk about the positive sides of CrossFit. Actually, do both, because I've done CrossFit for 2 years and I really enjoyed it, and I got really strong doing CrossFit, and I got really fit. But I also had problems doing CrossFit, obviously, and so I want to talk about both the negatives and the positives. But it's easy to make jokes about CrossFit. So if we ever dip into that, I would not have any problems.
Yeah, I think that from a high level standpoint, I mean, and we have strong first instructors who own CrossFit boxes and train a little bit more in a CrossFit fashion. There's people that get the CrossFit designation and then don't do much of what comes out of HQ. Here's some of the positives with CrossFit. Olympic lifting, strongman training, odd implement training, all of these modalities that were not popular before CrossFit was popular are now popular. They've had a huge influence on the fitness world in general, and have brought about awareness and utilization of these various tools and techniques. In February of this coming year, I'll have been certified with Pavel for 22 years, long before CrossFit was a thing, right? And when I started with kettlebells, I was told multiple times, it's a fad, nobody's going to be doing that in 5 years, and blah, 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 blah. And here I am 22 years later, still teaching, coaching, using kettlebells. It's gone from fad to standard, right? So there's a lot of these sandbags and Olympic lifting and gymnastic style training
Mm.
that has been popularized and really brought to the forefront by CrossFit. Awesome.
Yeah.
They nailed they really nailed the competitive aspect and people wanting to see where they are on the measuring stick. So, that from a motivation standpoint and kind of a culture standpoint, they really kind of initially identified themselves and created their group that was really interested in that. From a business model standpoint, hey, it's hard to argue with, right?
Oh yeah.
So they had that. Now, and if you look at the original CrossFit papers that kind of laid out what they were going to be doing, there was some mobility work. You did some strength work or had a gymnastics kind of focus of a skill that you were working on. You did some strength work. You did a metabolic finisher, a Metcon of some sort. I mean, that's the basic anatomy of a training session, right? It's not, there wasn't anything revolutionary about it, but it was a good way to structure a training program. It really is. Now, the dark side of this is when every session is a test, every session is a push to max out something.
Mhm.
And that's a broad generalization that doesn't fit everything that happens within that group. But when you perceive all training to be testing,
Mhm.
you will push too far.
Mhm.
High intensity training is great for about 6 to 8 weeks. And then you will go down the other side of it. It's your body can't recover from that level of stress and that level of glycolytic work. You'll find the other end of it. And our own instructors kind of fall into this a little bit as from a strong first perspective when we talk about the snatch test. So the snatch test is 5 minutes of fun. Say that very tongue in cheek. Very few people enjoy doing their snatch test, but they start to train the snatch test by repeating the snatch test. Well, that's testing. That's not training.
Yeah.
So training, and the other area where we see this from a lot of folks is the military, law enforcement, air arenas where you come through a boot camp that is built to identify you as being somebody that can do that job.
Mhm.
Well, that training that identifies you is not the training that will develop you.
Mhm.
So the test of a snatch test that says you have put in enough work and training to you have the conditioning, overhead stability, and strength to be able to handle the certification. That's why the snatch test is there. Is not the training that gets you to the snatch test.
Mhm.
So when we lay it out and we break it apart and say, okay, this is the test that I want to be good at. How am I going to train to get there? Those two things should look different. If you're just constantly, it'd be like saying, well, I want to run, I want to run a great 5K. So you just go out every day and try and beat your time on your 5K run. You'll have some success for a few weeks,
And then
and
just
then you won't.
yeah,
You'll go over to the other side and start having problems. So I think if there were more separation of testing and training, for a lot of people, and in particular within some of the CrossFit methodologies, I think you'd see some good results.
So yeah, I think that was the point I was going to make. The problem I had with CrossFit is it matches the wrong sort of people with the wrong sort of workouts, which means very competitive people that really like pushing themselves, and some workouts that are really challenging but fun. And also there's a scoring system.
Mhm.
So
Which is awesome from that motivation standpoint and that
yeah.
that culture standpoint. But the dark side of that is when you're constantly put up against that measuring stick and either feeling like you need to push beyond this indication of a little bit of discomfort that should tell you to, that's enough. You push through it because you're trying to get on that leaderboard. You're trying to test better than you did last time. It can definitely lead you to pushing through. And what I always tell people is, are you getting paid to hit that next rep? Because if you're not getting paid to hit it, I'm pretty sure you can put the barbell, kettlebell, band, put it down, take a break. And but you override that very quickly.
Yeah, it's so easy to do. So I really like doing, was it the Fran? Which is, those girl workouts are insane.
Yeah, I mean, there's a whole kind of misogynistic thing going on there where you're doing Fran and one of the things that I didn't particularly care for within how they would name and do, and
I didn't.
That's not just within that group. It's there's a whole range of people that put things out there that I'm just like, why'd you have to say it like that?
Oh, I didn't realize that before. Since English is not my native language, I just okay. All right.
Yeah. So, and whether that was intentional or not, that is how it comes across. So
yeah, probably not flying well in today's world.
No, and you know, I get some counterculture stuff. I get being and that was, you know, a big part of the identity there for a while. So yeah, I mean, just to kind of, you know, button that conversation up. I mean, undeniably influential to the fitness world. But you know, there's some things that I would do differently. Is how I kind of summarize it.
And I think also another problem that I had was, as you said, the basic structure of a training session is actually ideal. And people didn't train that way. Like when I was growing up in the 90s, people did pretty much bodybuilding. And they didn't, their concept of doing some metabolic work was just going on the treadmill. So they didn't do anything else that requires strength and aerobic capacity at the same time, more endurance stuff like that. And most people didn't even use a barbell. For a lot of people that just use those bodybuilding machines. So I think it had an immense positive effect on the general population and exposing people to barbells and kettlebells. The first time I was exposed to kettlebells was through CrossFit. And for most people, I think that's the case now. Sure.
Yeah, it's been very influential, and I mean it's funny though. I you know, it's hard to see a fitness related advertisement that doesn't have a kettlebell in it. It's become like the thing you include in the media, in the advertising, to identify it as a fitness related thing. So it's you know, and you know, not that I, you know, you can see all of mine around the room, and that's just half or less than half of what's in this room. So yeah, I think that's really interesting what's happened over the years.
Yeah, it's amazing, and it's such an old implement. Like I've seen the 300-year-old examples of kettlebells.
Yeah, and you know, it's a cannonball with a handle on it. It's been around for a long time. They're you know, Chinese stone locks have been around for millennia. Not a kettlebell, but a similar-ish tool.
Weight, right? When you hold it, it's also slightly offset, like the kettlebell.
Well, it's a big block, so the handle is here, and then it's a big weight. That's sometimes the handle, sometimes it's just part of the block, but it's a block. So different tool, but arguably kind of similar, because it does have a little bit of a displaced center of mass. And you know, in the end, and there's people that, you know, will try to argue different things about kettlebell training and where kettlebells come from, and it's like, A, I don't care. B, the guy I learned it from is Russian. C, it's a cannonball with a handle on it. like, let's not be so, it's just not important. It's not important to me anyway. And I'm familiar with the memes where it's like, the Samuel L. Jackson character, call it kettlebell one more time. And I'm like, I don't care. Call it kettlebell, kettlebell. I don't, are you using it? Are you interested in learning about it? Then I'm going to be there to help you with it.
Yeah, I would say so too. I am interested in the history of it because I think it's just fascinating that it's fascinating that it has found some use with grapplers 200-300 years ago, and then was completely forgotten, and then got really popular with grapplers again. So I think stuff like that is really interesting. So I like the history of those, but it's a bit shrouded in mystery too.
Yeah, and I think that when you to go down the historical path a little bit, and you can I'll look up the information for Dr. Ed Thomas's YouTube channel and some of the information that he's shared. He's what I would consider to be one of the forerunning exercise historians, physical culture historians, and De Arte Gymnastica by Mercurialis was published in 1569. You can see dumbbell training, rotational training, body weight training, medicine balls, a lot of things that we started thinking of as like functional training in the the 2000s or whatnot. There it is from 1569. So it's been around for much longer than that. And you peel kind of the layers back and you go into the history of training with the Greeks. And the most training was focused around some sort of training the military, training to be a warrior in some fashion. And so that's where a lot of that stuff comes from. So ancient Greek methodologies, and when you look at it, P.H. Ling, who was the developer of a Swedish system of gymnastic style training that led to physical therapy and the development. If you've ever had a Swedish massage, you can thank P.H. Ling. He was one of the innovators and developers of that, and that goes back, into the 1700s or whatnot. So, there is a much richer history of training beyond the bodybuilding sort of mindset. But then you can look at Eugene Sandow, Arthur Saxon, Earl Lederman. Look at some of the old time strongmen and the way that they were approaching training. So, yeah, there's some really interesting conversations to be held around the history of training.
Oh yeah. So, what's your favorite forgotten old school exercise? Who doesn't do it, but they should be doing?
I mean, I think the one that is probably the most the best example of an old school exercise that has some great benefit is the bench press.
Yeah.
That probably the one that is the most bizarre looking, and one that can build some really usable and interesting strength. It's now in today's society, when people have locked up T-spines and the hip mobility issues and different things that we bring with us from our sedentary and seated work existence, it can be a challenging move to build towards, but the journey to get there and the execution of the bench press is probably one of those examples of an old school exercise that it's made a little bit of a comeback. And first time I saw it was in Pavel's the original RKC Challenge book, and that was the original program minimum was snatches and bench presses, not swings and get-ups.
So do you think it's a good replacement for a bench press?
Different. So bench press is one of those lifts that's for a long time the judge of somebody's upper body strength was how much you could military press. That's because nobody had thought to lay down on a bench and press a weight. Yeah. As that became more standard and it became the lift of the day. You can definitely move a lot of weight that way. There is from a back health standpoint, as you push higher for a military press, you're going to load the system in a way that has some potential risk to it. With a bench press, you're risking more your shoulders than anything, and you can get away with bench pressing if your technique is good and everything for a while without really finding that. So it's an easy lift to look at and say, oh, that's just not functional. And that's what happened to it in that functional training shift that happened. The mindset was, well, why would you bench press? You're not going to lay down on the field and push players off of you. So why are you laying down and trying to, push weight? From a powerlifting standpoint, I'm sorry.
BJJ would like to have a word.
Yeah, there's definitely reasons to do it. From an upper body mass development standpoint, a lot of benefit there. Russian boxers will bench press and do things a lot and can help with punching power and things of that nature. So,
does bench press help punching power appreciably? I know they do it. My boxing trainer was from a Russian school of thought, so we were doing that, but I don't think it actually allows a person to punch harder. Like, I don't think it is. It helps with that, because I don't think it can structurally help with that. It's just not the same kind of energy production, I think. What do you think about that? I know it's a bit,
devil's in the details. There is a base level of strength that leads to being able to produce more power. If you're below that base level of strength, you're not going to be able to produce as much power. So you want to clear that threshold first. And I'd have to look at the training manuals or the research to pull out any usable numbers, but there's metrics that boxing coaches will look for, that if you can't bench this, we should work on that till you can, because it is that increase in strength is going to help you produce more power. Once you clear that, now we start talking about maybe some speed or power type of movements that can help improve punching power. But none of that matters till you can, get over that threshold of base minimum strength. So it's and then once you're strong enough and once you can do the power moves, does your technique actually allow you to apply it? And so that can be, and then, because interesting, I was listening to Peter Attia's book, Outlive, and he has a chapter on stability training. And one of the things he starts the chapter with is talking about he likes to race cars. So he's an amateur race car driver, and his personal car is a car that has about 450 horsepower. And on the opportunities that he can get it on the track and drive it, notice I did not say freeways, I said track. He goes to someplace where that's what you're supposed to be doing. He loves, getting and pushing that and, doing his race car thing in his personal car. Well, the car that he's there to train on and to use in this racing driving school is basically the same car, but it only produces about 190 horsepower. But it will knock off the laps several seconds faster than his car that produces 450 horsepower. And the difference is the race car that's designed to be raced has a different suspension and chassis and sticks to the ground better and handles, so it makes the most of that 190 horsepower to the point that it's faster than the 450 horsepower car. Because that 450 horsepower car, even though you can produce a whole bunch of extra horsepower, you can't apply it to the ground. And so the rubber's got to meet the road. Driving joke. at some point. And that usually happens in the skill and ability to apply that strength and power into the movement of punching.
Yeah, especially when you think about it, a human male over, say, 200 pounds, when they punch another person clearly with full power, they're gonna knock them out. Like, it doesn't matter if they knock them out 10% more at that point.
Yeah.
So it's probably how you direct that power and like the whole strategy, but also applying it to the right place, obviously mechanically, because the moment arm defines how much torque is going to be applied to the rest of the system. So you can spin the head and stuff like that. So yeah, I think trying to increase power in like pro boxers or people have been boxing, not pro boxers, but people have been doing boxing for a while, is, I don't know, I find it really old school and very 70s, 60s kind of thinking.
Well, they were knocking people out back then too.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Oh yeah. I think we're coming at the closing hours of minutes of our podcast.
Yep.
So do you want to add anything to the stuff we talked about?
I think that you know, from a high level, the and I just did a newsletter for Strong First on this, and you know, understand or not to understand. That is the question, to paraphrase the Bard. You know, diving down the rabbit hole and understanding all the energy systems and being able to look at the mechanical, neurological, and metabolic things that we're trying to accomplish within a exercise or protocol program. You don't have to do that. If you want to, it's great. You can just follow the program. And you know, so Pavel has one of the lines that stuck out to me from one of his early books was the drowning person does not want to understand hydrodynamics. They just want to not drown. They just want to swim. So understanding can be a delaying tactic. So if you're waiting to understand something fully before you do it, there's a lot of understanding that you gain from doing it. So sometimes you just want to follow the program. So we talked about some fairly high level stuff, or potentially complicated stuff as far as energy systems and what's actually happening. You know, so I don't want people to walk away with this and say, "Oh, I'm not ready for that because I don't understand all that stuff." You don't have to. We took care of that in the way we put the protocol together and some of the guidelines that we laid down. Mm-hmm. So, you know, enjoy your training and, kind of, you know, fun stuff and just kind of, always good to talk around some concepts and, good stuff.
Yeah, it is. And yeah, I think the saying perfect is the enemy of good is excellent. People hold on doing stuff until the timing is perfect, and that usually results in worse results.
The other, an imperfect plan executed today is better than the perfect plan that never gets executed.
Oh yeah. Let's not overplan. And thanks a lot for joining us today, Brett. And
awesome. Thank you, Mert. See you on the next one.